Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Good morning. It is just a delight to be here with you at Advent this morning. I know many of you, but for those of you whom I haven't met or don't know, my name is Becca Seely, and I am the Lutheran campus pastor serving college and graduate students right here in New York City. I serve students through The Vine, which is a citywide campus ministry network, and also through its local branch, LAMP, which is Advent's ecumenical ministry to students right here in this neighborhood and up in Morningside Heights. So I will confess to you that one of the great joys of ministry with college students is that they don't generally get up before noon on Sunday mornings, which means not that I ever sleep in, no, but that I get to lead worship and to preach at diverse, amazing congregations all throughout our synod, which is a blessing. But as you may know, when I'm not out doing that, Sunday mornings will find me here at Advent, which is kind of my home base when I'm not on the road, if you will. And for me, these Sundays at Advent are my relaxed, worshipful Sunday mornings, and I'm so grateful to have a community like this to call home. So thank you for being that community, and thank you for inviting me to share the word with you here on this fifth Sunday in Lent. So can you believe it's already the fifth Sunday in Lent? This is crazy, right? We're almost to Holy Week, so hold on to your hats. But before we get there, before Palm Sunday, I think it would be helpful to take a few minutes and look back at where we've been so far on this journey toward Jerusalem, toward the cross, toward Easter. 5 weeks ago, Jesus faced temptation in the desert. And then in 4 successive and successively longer readings from John's Gospel, we've seen Jesus encounter these people who just don't know what to make of him. He meets Nicodemus, the curious Pharisee, in the dark of the night. He meets an outcast Samaritan woman at a well and asks her for a drink of water. He smears mud on the eyes of a man born blind. And in each of these meetings, Jesus confounds expectations and crosses boundaries to reveal more and more about who he is, the Son of God who offers salvation to those who trust in him. So I don't know about you, but I often struggle with Jesus in John's Gospel. He is constantly monologuing and speaking in all these ornate, repetitive metaphors, just like over and over again. Sometimes I just want that sweet brevity of Mark, who just tells you the story without all the dialogue. And for me, at least, that theological bent in John and the way that Jesus talks in John, it can distract me from the flesh and blood concrete reality of what Jesus is actually doing in these stories. He isn't just like hanging out at a well, preaching about how he's living water. He's meeting this woman who's been discarded and abandoned in her society and offering her love and relationship and dignity that she is so desperately thirsting for. He isn't just like telling everyone, I'm the light of the world, guys. He's using his own spit and dirt to bring sight to a man who has never seen before. So when Christians talk about John's gospel or when they talk about salvation, so often we're talking in some future tense or about some like alternative realm that we might access if we professed certain beliefs. But when Jesus talks about salvation, he's living out a salvific reality here and now. Forget wings and halos. Jesus' salvation has dirt under its fingernails and kind of a shady reputation, and it does not flinch when it gets judgmental gazes, which it better be prepared to do, because this morning that salvation of Jesus comes with tears stinging its eyes and with the stench of a man dead 4 days. So if you walk, as I sometimes do, through this world wearing a clerical collar, you will discover that this is essentially like a magnet on your neck for random people who want to talk to you about religion. Like maybe they hate it, maybe they love it, maybe they grew up Catholic, often they did, maybe they are spiritual but not religious, maybe they want to know if Jesus would be okay with them doing yoga. I think he would. So I've had lots of these fun and memorable conversations with folks on the street and the subway, but I will always remember a man who approached me once here in the city. And he saw me in my collar, and he introduced himself as a Christian and a preacher. And I could tell he was looking at me like with a little bit of a squint eye. Like he was a little bit dubious about who I was, this lady in a priest costume walking down 8th Avenue. So he asked me, what church are you part of, ma'am? And I told him, well, I'm Lutheran. And he took a minute, he digested that. But then finally he reached out his hand and he took my hand and he said, well, you may be a Lutheran, but we're all the same, right? All of us Christians are just trying to get to heaven. We're all just trying to live through this mess down here and keep our hands clean and get on through to the other side, to the resurrection. Am I right? So I don't know if that experience was unique. I tend to think maybe it wasn't. I know I'm probably not the only person here who has heard religious talk like this before, right? Religion that puts all its hope in life beyond the grave and resigns itself to the death that surrounds us here and now. Indeed, Jesus encounters some version of religion like this in Martha, who, disappointed by Jesus' tardiness and obviously sick with grief, takes much needed solace in her faith that Lazarus will rise again on the last day. To this, Jesus says, yes, but, yes, and. I am the resurrection, and I am the life. I am the hope for the last day, but that's not all. I don't want to wait. God doesn't want to wait until then for life. And then heartbroken at the death of his friend, and at the grief of Mary and Martha and the community, and for all children of God who have given up hope in the face of a force of destruction that is bigger than they can possibly imagine standing up to or defeating, Jesus weeps. He cries, and still crying, he goes to Lazarus' tomb and he rolls the stone away. And into that dust from which we all come and to which we shall all return, he breathes life. Life that is not heavenly, that is not shiny or cherubic, but life that looks like breath in the lungs of a man who is stinking with death. Life that looks like a heart beating underneath burial clothes. Jesus raises up the one who is past all hope and calls him out and commands the gathered crowd to set him free. Lazarus, come out. So there's a joke among preachers. I'm really going to give you the inside pastor scoop today. There's a joke among preachers that what Jesus is really implying when he throws open the door to that closety cave and cries, Lazarus, come out, is not really about death, but maybe a different kind of coming out that Lazarus might be doing there. It's just hilarious, right? Very funny. And it's a good joke, but except here's the thing. When I was a young teenager in the closet, knowing I was gay and not having told anybody, I was afraid all the time. Afraid of being found out, afraid of being rejected, afraid of letting anyone too close to me. And that fear, that hiding, it diminished the life in me. It snuffed out the light that God had given me. And so at the risk of being cute, I'll tell you that the words, Becca, come out, were words of life breathed into me. Everything wasn't like magically perfect, but that process of stepping out into the light, of taking the risk of being fully myself, fully that person that God created me to be, it was like the sun rising. It was like spring coming after a long winter. It was like life. My friends, I don't have to tell you that we live in a world very full of very real death, of tombs both literal and lived, a world of violence and power that threaten and harm, of modern-day Babylonian exiles, of deportees, people in hiding and refugees, of people thirsting at dry wells, used up and discarded by a world that values them only for what they can produce. So much of our lives are lived out of fear, of power and violence, yes, perhaps, but also of scarcity and meaninglessness and inadequacy and despair. I see it among students with whom I work. It's the culture of higher education, a culture of death that says again and again that you are and the meaning of your life is bound up in what you can achieve. And not just good grades or test scores or resumes or internships, but in doing enough activities or having enough friends or being romantically appealing enough or, I don't know, just being busy. That it's not who you are, but your potential that matters. Too often, students hear over and over again that who they become in the future is more important than who they are right now, and so they should work hard today and be happy later. I don't know, maybe on that last day. And I know full well from my own experience, and I imagine some of you know too, that this is not an exclusively student experience. This is the water we're all drinking. My friends, the abundant life into which Jesus is inviting us, it requires that we cease to wait for a different day for salvation. Jesus is calling us here and now to come out, to bring all of ourselves into the light. Here and now, he's calling us to actually live now, and that entails risk, and that entails vulnerability. To follow Jesus towards the tombs in ourselves and our world, and even in the midst of our weeping, to start shouldering those stones away. To remove the blindfolds that we wear to protect ourselves, and to begin the messy, smelly work of unbinding our neighbors. To give up resignation for Lent, to lay our fear down, to risk the hostility of a world that would prefer that the dead remained that way, and that the promise of new life was always a carrot held out just out of reach. And yet there is that promise on the lips of Jesus, the promise of life abundant and simple and good and sufficient and connected and free. A promise which, if we let it, will call us out and bring us alongside Jesus on his way of love and liberation, even as it leads us down that same way to the cross. The word for church in Greek is ecclesia, and literally what that means is the called out ones. And if I have one hope and one prayer for our campus ministry and for this congregation and for the body of Christ in all places, it is that we would be church like that. That together we would come out of our tombs of fear and self-protection, whatever they look like, and get down to the business of living. God, help us remove the stones and cut through the bonds of death. Help us build communities of life where love and relationship flourish, where justice is demanded and done, where exiles and queer kids and even guys like Lazarus who are a little bit stinky are welcomed and loved. In these days to come, as we walk with Jesus toward death, may the breath on our lips be words of life. Amen.